Philosophy can help us answer questions in international relations. Much classical philosophy focuses on the state and its leaders, the basic building blocks of international relations, as well as on methods of analysis. For example, the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, c. 427 to 347 BCE, in the Republic, concluded that in the perfect state, the people who should govern are those who are superior in the ways of philosophy and war. Scholars often draw on history to help understand world politics. However, there were also significant differences between these events. Plato called these ideal rulers philosopher kings. Though not directly discussing international relations, Plato introduced two ideas seminal to the discipline: class analysis and dialectical reasoning, both of which were bases for later Marxist analyses, in which economic class is the major divider in domestic and international politics. Chapter 8 explores this viewpoint in more detail. It helps us explain the tension between global and local policies, whereby, for example, local-level textile workers lose their jobs to foreign competition and are replaced by high-technology industries. Just as Plato's contributions to contemporary thinking were both substantive and methodological, the contributions of his student, the philosopher Aristotle, 384 to 322 BCE, lay both in substance, the search for an ideal domestic political system, and in method. Analyzing 168 constitutions, Aristotle looked at the similarities and differences among states, becoming the first writer to use the comparative method of analysis. He concluded that states rise and fall largely because of internal factors, a conclusion still debated in the 21st century. After the classical era, many of the philosophers of relevance to international relations focused on the foundational questions of the discipline. The English philosopher Thomas Hobbes, 1588 to 1679, in Leviathan, imagined a state of nature, a world without governmental authority or civil order, where men rule by passions, living with the constant uncertainty of their own security. To Hobbes, the life of man is solitary, selfish, and even brutish. Society is in a state of nature, or anarchy. Under anarchy there is no hierarchically superior, coercive authority that can create laws or enforce law and order. Extrapolating to the international system, which also lacks such an overarching authority, states in this anarchic condition act as man does in the state of nature. For Hobbes, the solution to the dilemma is a unitary state, a Leviathan, where power is centrally and absolutely controlled. The French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, 1712–78, addressed the same set of questions but, having been influenced by the Enlightenment, saw a different solution. In Discourse on the Origin and Foundations of Inequality Among Men, Rousseau described the state of nature as an egocentric world, with man's primary concern being self-preservation, not unlike Hobbes's description of the state of nature. Rousseau posed the dilemma in terms of the story of the stag and the hare. In a hunting society, each individual must keep to his assigned task so the hunters can find and trap the stag for food for the whole group. However, if a hare happens to pass nearby, an individual might well follow the hare, hoping to get his next meal quickly and caring little for how his actions will affect the group. Rousseau drew an analogy between these hunters and states. Do states follow short-term self-interest, like the hunter who follows the hare? Or do they recognize the benefits of a common interest? Rousseau's solution to the dilemma posed by the stag and the hare was different from Hobbes's Leviathan. Rousseau's preference was for the creation of smaller communities in which the general will could be attained. Indeed, according to Rousseau, it is only the general will, not a Leviathan, that can direct the forces of the state according to the purpose for which it was instituted, which is the common good. In Rousseau's vision, each of us places his person and all his power in common under the supreme direction of the general will, and as one we receive each member as an indivisible part of the whole. Still another philosophical view of the characteristics of international society was set forth by the German philosopher Immanuel Kant, 1724–1804, in both Idea for a Universal History and Perpetual Peace. Kant envisioned a federation of states as a means to achieve peace, a world order in which man is able to live without fear of war. Sovereignties would remain intact, but the new federal order would be both preferable to a super-Leviathan, and more effective and realistic than Rousseau's small communities. Kant's analysis was based on a vision of human beings that was different from that of either Rousseau or Hobbes. In his view, though man is admittedly selfish, he can learn new ways of cosmopolitanism and universalism. The tradition laid down by these philosophers has contributed to the development of international relations by calling attention to fundamental relationships, those between the individual and society, between individuals in society, and between societies. These philosophers had varied, often competing, visions of what these relationships were and what they ought to be. The early philosophers have led contemporary international relations scholars to the examination of the characteristics of leaders, to the recognition of the importance of the internal dimensions of the state, to the analogy of the state and nature, and to descriptions of an international community. History and philosophy permit us to delve into foundational questions, the nature of people and the broad characteristics of the state and of international society. They allow us to speculate on the normative, or moral, elements in political life. What should be the role of the state? What ought to be the norms in international society? How might international society be structured to achieve order? When is war just? Should economic resources be redistributed? Should human rights be universalized? Philosophical methods may not be useful for helping us answer specific questions. They may tell us what should be done, providing the normative guide, but philosophy generally does not help us make or implement policy. Nevertheless, both history and philosophy are key tools for international relations scholars.